It's very exciting to be here talking about Gavi, especially now that Amanda's taken off the slide that shows the U.S. way over here in the wrong side of the equation. But I would say that the U.S. is incredibly committed to immunization and to Gavi. We see the future of immunization and vaccines as really part of the big game changers that are going to allow us to achieve the sort of child mortality goals that we've espoused, as well as even with some of the vaccines, some of the other areas, some of the other goals, and potentially malaria and TB, HIV/AIDS someday. So we're incredibly focused on and enthusiastic about the work that can be done on immunization and that Gavi is doing. I was reflecting as the various presentations were going on about why are donors like the U.S. So committed? What is it that we, the donors, are saying to each other? What is it when I go up and have to talk to Hill staffers or others that we're saying is our compelling case? And I guess there's a couple key things. One is, it is the compelling story. This is about saving children's lives. And there's just nothing better than that. And every single parent in the room kind of immediately understands the value of that. And the powerful advocacy around that compelling story stands alone. But beyond just that story, it's also this value for money. Helen was mentioning sort of having already saved 5 million lives in the short span that Gavi has been here, the potential going forward with Rota and Pneumo and Meninge and the existing set of vaccines where I think the last estimate I heard was 7 million lives over the next 10 years, is just extraordinary. And there are very few interventions that you can invest in and get that kind of return. It is also, though, the strategic approach that's being brought to this particular domain. It's not just, okay, we get a product, we're going to get it out. It's actually shaping that product. It's this issue of how can we help drive the research and development and accelerate it and make sure it's resulting in the kind of products that can immediately be used in developing country situations. How are we helping to ensure that there is the capacity and the affordable pricing and the evidence base to allow us to accelerate access? How can we shorten that period of time from when a vaccine becomes available in the U.S. and when it becomes available in a developing country? And there's just been an enormous amount of work and a lot of innovative financing that you've seen that is focused on really addressing those challenges and in a hugely successful way, which is very exciting. It's looking at the kind of delivery systems in the countries and thinking creatively about how do we improve the access and the scale up in countries. And then you see something like the introduction, like the UK analysis, which every single government in the world looks at. And even if our own governments aren't in a position to do this kind of analysis, is hugely compelling when you see that kind of graphic. And it does really speak to the kind of work that Gavi is doing, but perhaps even more to the partnership who have helped this happen. All of the innovations that were talked about this morning, the original spark for those didn't happen inside a Gavi secretariat. They happened inside the Gavi community, with the partners identifying these things and saying, let's bring this to vaccines, let's bring this into Gavi, now let's work as a community and make this happen. And that is the power. You see in Gavi, and you saw in Amanda's slides, there is a hardcore base, a really loyal base to Gavi, who are exceptionally important. I mean, you have the UK and Norway and Gates Foundation and France and Italy and the US too, even if we look small on the way she did her chart, who are really the loyal base. And that's important. But what's even more important is this sort of diversification, the number of new partners that are expressing interest in joining Gavi. So Japan and Korea and China and Brazil and Russia, and South Africa, who are all really interested in how can they become contributing members to this larger global effort. But it's not also only the donors. I mean, the donors are helping to provide funding, which is clearly the fuel. But it's this stakeholder base. And as Helen mentioned, it's a mixed blessing. Having a lot of stakeholders who have different agendas, who have, their definition of what are we trying to achieve isn't always the same. But it's that difference in perspective that makes this effort more robust. And lets us really kind of learn and have to push and prod each other into getting to a better space. I think what's changed a little bit, there's a couple of different things that have been added on to the list. You know, the compelling story, the value for money, the strategic approach, the excitement around that, the innovative financing, which has shown that a dollar can be worth more than a dollar if it brings extra benefits to it. But there's also a couple other areas now that donors are increasingly focusing on and partners are focusing on. So it is this issue of country accountability, which is measured in results. Are the countries using those funds that are provided to them to best effect? And are the countries putting up some of their own money to show that they really own and are driving forward this agenda? It's about the integrity of the funds and the sort of systems that help ensure that the funds are used for their intended purpose. And ensuring that, you know, an organization like Gavi is completely on top of that and is very much driving forward to ensure that, you know, if there is a breach in how funds are used, immediately knowing it and being able to build the system to capture it and then strengthen capacity and ensure that the funds are used for the intended purposes. And that's exceptionally important right now when you have a lot of governments struggling to make sure that they have funds to invest in programs like this. They want to know that every dollar is going where it's supposed to go. The last area I would highlight as being sort of the critical thing, and it links a little bit back to some of this innovative financing, but it's that creativity. You know, you clearly heard from David, the creativity never stops, and so lots of kind of potential ideas, and I'm delighted to see the results-based financing being tagged. I think looking at how can Gavi and how can the immunization community harness the incredible level of expertise, of thinking that doesn't just exist amongst, you know, the hardcore immunization donors or even the immunization community, but that exists overall in a number of different sectors, from, you know, the engineers who were the basis for the cold chain, to some of the scientists who are driving research, to, you know, the students that we have now at various universities who are coming up with these incredibly creative adaptations of existing technologies to improve how we can do business in a variety of areas. So it's that sort of harnessing the creativity around vaccines, around the whole immunization system, around the information flows, and how do you use, you know, mHealth and telehealth to really kind of capture the ability to have information flowing much, much more effectively. And how do you build that health system strengthening, which is, you know, kind of the toughest part of all of our jobs? How do you make sure that that underlying base is there, but in a way that is delivering real results? And hence why sort of that link to something like results-based financing, which is how do you make the chain of events arrive at a child being immunized, or a woman delivering in a facility, or someone sleeping under a bed net, whatever the metric may be. How do you make sure that whole chain of health system events gets there? And donors are really looking at that. And there's a recognition that Gavi can't drive health systems. You can't drive a health system around immunization. The Global Fund can't drive health systems just around AIDS, malaria, or TB. It's this issue of fitting into the larger community and recognizing where's the niche, where's the comparative advantage, and then how does it go forward. So with that, I would just close. I think the replenishment that's coming up in June, there's a tremendous amount of excitement. The community has really rallied around. As Helen has said, it's gotten huge amounts of political commitment that have not been seen, I think, in the past with Gavi. There's always been a political will, but not quite at this level with this level of visibility. And there's a real excitement about driving Gavi into the next stage of its life. And you can kind of look at Gavi as having, you know, going through its stages, from the earliest stages where it was, you know, an explosion of creativity and enthusiasm, but not so many systems and mechanisms, to really maturing and building in a lot of mechanisms and governance structures and stuff, but maybe at the loss of some of its creativity, to sort of this next phase, which will be the merger of it all. And so I think it's with that vision that the whole world is joining hands in excitement around taking this initiative forward further.